Billionaires are paying, in terms of income taxes, as you pointed out just a moment ago, they're paying almost nothing. In fact, many of them are paying zero in income taxes, and that's not fair.
Professor Reich, first off, I mean, inflation's not coming down. I take issue with that. The inflation rate is coming down, but we're not seeing prices collapse. Does the president, though, have a point about gouging?
Well, I think the president is trying to make the distinction that you just made, Brian, which is that inflation and bringing inflation down is different from bringing prices down. And a lot of the public right now, they say, well, inflation is still a problem. What they really mean is that they are seeing in the grocery stores and with consumer goods generally, they're seeing prices stay very, very high because even though many costs have come down for big corporations, they are keeping prices high, naturally, to make as much money as they possibly can.
Yeah, Jimmy, listen, corporate profits overall are at a record high. But I just wonder, you know, when you say gouging, you're sort of demonizing corporate America, and there's no such thing as corporations. Corporations are just groups of people, and I kind of, what rattled me a little bit was not only the incorrect statement about inflation, but more just the fact that you're kind of demonizing millions of people in a weird way.
Yeah, listen, as a statement of economics, it's absolutely silly. It seems to confuse inflation and disinflation
and deflation. Yeah.
So it's a ridiculous statement. Now, as politics, you know, maybe not. Maybe their polling says, you know, that we should be going after companies more. I'm sure Bob wishes we had seen a lot more tweets like this. And, you know, same thing with this billionaires tax you mentioned earlier. So as politics, it may make a lot of sense. But it is not uncommon after economic shocks for profits to go up. So what you're saying is that, like, every time there's been like an economic shock for like the past 100 years, corporations have suddenly got greedy and they've been trying to exploit people. And remember that if consumers did not have the demand to support those prices would come down. That's how companies are, quote unquote, getting away with it, because there's lots of demand. I would think Bob likes a high demand economy.
Jimmy, I do like a high-demand economy, but I also like an economy that's competitive. And what we do know about the American economy is that more and more industry has become more and more concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer companies. And this allows companies to raise their prices without worrying about losing consumers. And this is a problem. I think the way to deal with it, ideally, is through antitrust law. And the Biden administration is doing something that my administration, the Clinton administration, and the Obama administration did not do enough of, in my humble opinion, and that is enforce the antitrust laws.
Listen, I mean, the reason we have an inflation problem is because of fiscal and monetary policy. I mean, that was what has changed between 2019 and today. We had a pandemic, and we decided to use monetary policy and fiscal policy to keep the economy from collapsing. And now we're trying to deal with that. All these other things like modify, more resilient supply chains and antitrust. That's all stuff that, may or may not be a good idea, but that is not the thrust of the issue. Unfortunately for the Biden administration, their fate is not in their own hands. It's in the hands of the Fed. So we will see tweets like this, which try to make it seem like they can do something about it. Maybe we'll catch a break and inflation will go down and we'll have a soft landing.
Honestly, I probably would have done the same thing, Jimmy, because the polling is terrible. You know, the economics is number one problem that people have. Everybody knows costs are up. You got to blame somebody. They're going to go after corporate America, like they kind of, they go after gas stations whenever the price of gas goes up.
I'm surprised there's not more tweets like this.
I'm surprised there's not tweets like this. Brian and Jimmy, I understand. We are on CNBC, and you want to be on the corporate side, and that's understandable. But just answer this one question: Do you think that corporate power, in terms of concentration of many, many businesses in the hands of fewer and fewer big corporations, is that a problem? Is that a problem that antitrust laws are designed to remedy? And shouldn't we have stronger antitrust enforcement? Yes or no?
I think in some areas it might be a problem, in other areas not. But taken together, that is not the reason that we've been suffering this, the highest inflation in 40 years.
Yeah.
Again, these are, you may want to do something about that, but it's really kind of orthogonal to the issue right now.
Yeah, and I got Professor Reich. I will say this, CNBC stands for Consumer News and Business Channel, so I'm trying to put the consumer, the C first as well, and I'm a consumer as well. I would, if you're asking me my opinion, nobody cares. I'll give it, which is I agree. But I also would agree that why have certain tech companies been able to lord over monopolies and destroy local news media when we have no investigative reporting on a local level, which allows politicians to get away with pretty much whatever they want, and the bridges go on and don't get built for 3 years because there's no local investigative journalism. That's my own opinion. Let's move on to the second issue, and that is taxes. Okay, and the tweet about paying, billionaires 25% sort of wealth tax. I want to say this. And listen, nobody has any sympathy for billionaires, okay? I'll never be one. We'll probably all never be one. I get it. I know a couple. The Tax Foundation reports that the top 1% make 21% of the income, but they pay 40% of the taxes. 47% of Americans have no net federal income tax bill after deductions. They pay Medicare, Social Security, state and local taxes, but no federal income tax bill. So, Professor Reich, what do you make of this wealth tax proposal, which didn't work in Europe, and I just don't know why they keep pushing it here?
Well, first of all, let's start with the reality of extraordinary inequality in this country and more of wealth concentrated at the very top. And that's been documented. I mean, everybody knows it. The median wage is only slightly higher than it was 40 years ago, adjusted for inflation. And most of the gains from the economy have gone to the top.
I apologize for interjecting, because I love you coming on the show. You're sort of conflating income and wealth inequality. There is no doubt wealth inequality, to your point, is at probably the highest level in 100 years, if not ever. But that's stocks, and that's income. Billionaires, as you know, don't have income.
Well, that's right, and so if you have only an income tax, and billionaires don't have much income, if they're just accumulating stocks and there is no tax on their appreciated income, then by definition, you're not going to be taxing billionaires.
I'm not bothered if people in this country can get really fabulously wealthy by creating goods and services that people really value. So I'm sure Europe, you're mentioning Europe, wishes it had more of these super entrepreneurs like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and the guys at Google. If you get rich that way, I mean, I don't know why that is exactly is a problem. It isn't a problem, and I would hate to do anything that would prevent people from starting businesses and even getting fabulously wealthy, because the value they create for all of us is far more than the value of their shares.
And we can all debate Thomas Piketty and go over that book and all those theories. But I guess, Professor Reich, my beef and why we are talking about it is, again, it's kind of this us versus them division that they're putting out there. Like, well, everyone's paying all these taxes and billionaires aren't doing it. Maybe billionaires aren't, but the upper income, all three of us on this screen, I hope, are paying, quote, our fair share in taxes, given that I presume we're all income earners and none of us has founded and sold a company and just live off, unrealized capital gains. But it's this idea that somehow we're not doing our fair share and everybody else is carrying the load, when the reality is the middle class tax burden in America has only declined for 40 years. If you make $125,000 a year, Professor, have a house and 2 kids, your net federal income tax burden is probably zero. Probably zero.
Well, the typical American American family is now earning $70,000 a year and paying an income tax rate of 14%. Is that fair? Is that not fair? Well, you just have to look at the billionaire class. Now, I think you're absolutely right, Brian, in terms of the top 10% are paying a lot in taxes, but billionaires are paying, in terms of income taxes, as you pointed out just a moment ago, they're paying almost nothing. In fact, many of them are paying zero in income taxes, and that's not fair. That's what the billionaire tax is, what Biden's billionaire tax is trying to rectify.
Yeah. Well, and it's, it scared me enough, Professor Reich, that I've decided not to become a billionaire. Jimmy, because I just don't want to be, I worry about that, and I want to do my fair share.
It's not for you. Brian, that's not for you.
Yeah, I'm 52. I think, I was going to start, but now...
Brian, you're a man of the people. That's not for
You know, you
I don't know what people,
both of you
people.
are men of the people. Let me just say one quick thing, and that is that we are on the cusp of the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth in history as very, very wealthy baby boomers begin to die off. And the problem is we don't have, you don't ever get any tax on the appreciation of that wealth, because at death, as you both know, the basis moves up to the market value at the time of death. And that's another very important aspect of the tax reformers.
They nailed the timeline on stocks and housing just by being born in certain years. I'm just jealous. But we'll get you back on to talk about that as well. Professor Robert Reich, Jimmy Pethokoukis, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a good point. The boomers nailed the timeline, just wrote everything up.